Welcome to the February meeting of the District 23 Zonta Says Now think tank. Please remember to keep your microphone on mute during the presentations and ask any questions in the chat line, and remind me to look at the chat line too. I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel that the pace of change in response to climate crisis is far too slow. However, I'm inspired by the tortoise. Yes, it's slow and steady, yet it did win the race against the hare. Interestingly, on the US Supreme Court building, tortoises are used to represent the slow and steady pace of justice. But the critical thinking that we need to make sure that we all keep moving slowly towards we've got to make sure that we don't stop moving towards our goal. So we don't want to put our heads in and our legs in like some tortoises do. So we've got a full agenda and we'll get started. First of all, we acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in all the places we meet from today and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. At each meeting, we like to acknowledge a female Aboriginal leader. And today we acknowledge Dr. Loetja O'Donoghue. This 5-minute video from the ABC sums up her incredible life, and she is an inspiration to us all.
Into the pomposity of Sir John Kerr's Government House,
the Order of Australia,
enters a real trailblazer, Loetja O'Donoghue.
I feel proud, not on my own behalf, but I think for the sake of Aboriginal people.
Before Mabo, before ATSIC, before the Redfern Address and the National Apology, Loetja O'Donoghue was an inspiration.
Other than my parents, it probably influenced me more than anybody else. She was just an outstanding individual.
She was actually a small woman in stature, and I guess she just had that ability to take command of a room with her presence.
She was taken from her mother as a toddler to a mission in South Australia's Flinders Ranges, where the missionaries named her Lois.
I don't remember, of course, very much of the actual removal from my mother, and I didn't remember my mother at all.
She was not able to speak her language there. She was not allowed to practice her culture.
I didn't know her, of course, for 30 years. And she told me at that time, your name, Loetja.
In 1954, she was the first Indigenous nurse at the Royal Adelaide Hospital.
She was knocking on the doors of Parliament House, going to speak to the then Premier of the day, you know, saying, help me, I want a nurse, there's no reason why I shouldn't because of the colour of my skin.
After battering her way through that ceiling, she rose through the public service all the way to Australian of the Year.
Her belief in changing the way Australia thought about and included Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people into every facet of the fabric of our society.
One of her many strengths, stoicism in the face of provocation.
A relative of the Mabo family discovered the senseless act of vandalism this morning.
There is still a great deal of racism in this country that we all need to deal with.
She was the first head of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission.
I think we might be able to come to some agreement.
She had this superb demeanour of disarming aggression, but at the same time focusing people on what we should achieve and work towards.
She worked with the Keating government to develop native title legislation.
It has stamped a new dimension in the relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians, and it has meant an enormous boost to the confidence of Indigenous Australians.
She retained her connection to community at the ground level, so grassroots, but she was able to talk to Prime Minister Keating during the Mabo decision, the native title work that was needed to be done, the apology with Kevin Rudd,
We apologise, especially for the removal of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families.
We, at last, had a Prime Minister who had the courage to actually say sorry. And it wasn't real hard.
Loicha's own mother, Lily, had died decades before the apology.
She would have thought of how no one ever apologised to Lily and to the other mothers who were without their children, some for the rest of their lives, never saw them again.
30 years before The Voice, Loicha O'Donoghue addressed the United Nations.
The Australian Constitution be changed to recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the continent's original inhabitants.
She was in a nursing home last year when that constitutional change was rejected.
Knowing Loicha as well, she would have said, well, the work needs to go on. And she would have looked at the outcome and would have seen that 40% of Australians voted for us, and that's an opportunity.
She would not have given up hope of Australia still wanting to see Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people succeed in whatever we undertake and whatever we do, and that the future will be better.
Her own success in life defied her traumatic upbringing, taken from her mother, raised on a mission.
When she eventually left the home, a matron said to her that she wouldn't amount to anything, which was a very hurtful thing, and she never ever forgot those words, and she lived by that, and she literally was like, well, I'm going to show you, and she most certainly did.
Trying to find that. Whoops. What an amazing woman, eh? So much against her, but she did brilliantly. Okay, I'll just go back into my screen share. There are just a few people coming in. I was just letting them in, so they're all in now, so that's good. Okay, I'll go back into my screen share. All right, so we just remind ourselves as to why Zonta says now. The train was built during the Industrial Revolution at a time when humans started putting more greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere, where they are accumulating and forming a blanket around the planet and causing global warming and associated extreme weather events. The extreme droughts, fires, floods lead to social disruption, causing millions of people to lose their livelihoods and homes. And this social disruption magnifies any existing inequality, including gender inequality. So Zonta Says Now works to stop the train by advocating for governments to meet their commitments under the Paris Climate Agreement and close the gender equality gaps in education, health, economic opportunity and safety. The women and girls who inspire Zonta Says Now include Dabor in Sudan, who has to walk further each day looking for food, water and wood in her drought-affected country. There's no time for her to go to school, and she no longer dreams of being a teacher. In Mozambique, Ayan, aged 11, is frightened as she's being sold into marriage. Her family lost everything in the floods that destroyed crops, houses and buildings, leaving her family destitute and unable to feed her. In Canada, Judith, aged 42, and her daughter Claire, aged 7, witnessed the wildfire smoke that caused Claire's asthma to get worse. Judith is losing income as she must stay home to care for Claire, and she's worried about losing her casual job. And in Australia, we've got women like Maria, who's 79, and she has to walk to the local library to find relief from extreme heat, as she cannot afford air conditioning in her rented apartment. She has a heart condition and worries about how she will financially, physically, and mentally survive the hot summer. Zonta Says Now seeks climate justice for women like Dabor, Ayan, Judith, Claire, and Maria. We want women to be able to prevent, prepare for, respond to, and recover from the impacts of climate change on the same basis as men. And we do this by taking gender equal climate action locally, nationally, and internationally. To help us take action, we have an international and district websites. We have our think tanks. We have our 5-step framework for action. We're guided by the International Strategic Plan and the Statement on Climate Change, and have developed many resources using the framework to help Zontans on their climate justice journey. The latest initiative internationally is the Virtual Art Gallery. Right, now I'm going to hand over to our guest speaker. Sue, are you able to introduce?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll stop the share while we go over.
Well, it seems very appropriate to have Catelyn today, doesn't it, after that video? I think nurses generally go into their work because they are very concerned about people, and that concern, you can understand, leads to a widening of the issues. So Catelyn is a proud registered nurse, humanitarian, passionate advocate for regenerative ecology, and president of Climate Action Nurses. Through her work volunteering with organisations such as the Oak Tree Foundation, which is very well known, AusAid, the Australian College of Nursing, and the Climate and Health Alliance, Catelyn fervently contributes to her life mission of spreading conscious kindness, and it's a great phrase. Catelyn was a 2022 Westpac Future Leaders Scholar and has completed a Master of Leadership, Health and Human Services through the University of Tasmania. And she's just told us she's about to start a PhD. She has presented on early career nurse leadership and environmental sustainability across a range of platforms, including the Australian College of Nursing National Nursing Forum and the South Pacific Nurses Forum. So I think it's going to be really interesting to listen to Catelyn today.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Carol, for extending the invitation for me to come and talk with everyone today. I'm just, I love the work that Zonta does. I think it's incredibly important. And I think it's important to bring all voices to the issue of climate action, which I suppose is a good segue into how I ended there myself. I'll just make sure my share screen and my presentation works and that you can see it all. Now, if I click this,
Yay.
You can all see just climate action nurses, and you can't see my notes on the other screen.
Correct.
That's right.
Right. That's what we want. We love when technology behaves as it's meant to. So before I begin fully going into the depths of my story, I would like to acknowledge the country that I'm on, which is Tomagini country, and pay my respects to the continuing custodians of Lutruwita, Tasmania, which is the Palawa Pakana, recognising that sovereignty of this land was never ceded. And it's so important to me to not only acknowledge that, but also to respect that the movement towards planetary health and climate action was deeply embedded in Indigenous wisdom and knowledge systems, far before it became a concept that was contemporary in the way that we are approaching it and understanding it. And that to me gets to the heart of what respect looks like, is that there is lessons for us to be learning here. Before my work with climate action nurses, I was first and foremost, I'd say, humanitarian, and I was always really driven by social justice issues. Having some difficult life circumstances early in life, which I won't go into in this storytelling session, but it meant that I moved out of home at around 15 or 16. And I remember taking away from those earlier years this deep intrinsic sense that I didn't want to contribute to any harm in the world. And more than that, I wanted to be contributing to good and to contributing to community. And that meant that I was able to move into boarding school at 16 and start volunteering with the Oak Tree Foundation.
which was for me an incredible experience. It was the first time I was with like-minded individuals who were championing the impacts of, or championing the cause of trying to fight extreme poverty and talking about poverty alleviation in the Pacific region, but also for me, I'd never heard or learnt anything about this. So it was deeply transformative for me to begin to start to care about social justice issues. And I remember the first campaign that I was a part of, I was a young 17-year-old at the time, and it was the Make Poverty History road trip, which sent 1,000 young people from all states and territories of Australia, except for Northern Territory, on a week-long road trip in their areas. And then they would all converge in the one place, which was Canberra, where we would all meet and have a big summit. And that experience has been truly, truly life-changing. Now, I'm hoping that you should be able to hear the volume. Just give me a wave if you can't hear it.
I am young.
I am Australian. I am passionate. I am ambitious.
And I want to see change in my lifetime.
I've got problems.
I've got problems. I've got problems.
But others have more.
I've got issues. But there are issues
Bigger than me.
I have a voice.
I have a voice.
I have a voice. My voice is powerful. My voice will be heard.
Mine is the voice of change.
And the time to change is now.
It still gives me shivers, even though it was many, many years ago. And there was just the last line, mine is the voice of change and the time for change is now, is just one of those things that I think when times get difficult, that stays in my head. That's what I come back to. And it was from that experience with the Oak Tree Foundation that I found myself in the Solomon Islands when I was 19. And I'd been there, fortunately, I'd had the opportunity to visit the Solomon Islands before that. So I developed a really strong and deep relationship with the area. But it was further deepened when I lived and worked there in a placement with AusAid and Young People Without Borders. And that experience to me was a deep instilling of what it means to know your gifts and give them. And that to me mostly was taught by the principal of the school that I was volunteering at, Marlene, who's a deep, deep friend of mine. And she was often trying to encourage me to deliver workshops and to teach some of the teachers there. And I was incredibly resistant and reticent to deliver these workshops. I was 19 at the time. I had no undergraduate degree. I had no experience in teaching, and I felt this deep sense of, oh, I can't be teaching. This is so, it goes against my values. I should be learning. I should be the learner here. So I said, no, Marlene, I will just be a teacher's assistant. I'm much more comfortable there. They say jump, I say how high. And so I was much more comfortable in that sort of role. And it wasn't until Marlene offered to take me to her village where I learnt some lessons about how I could actually contribute. And that came through the story of the produce over the hill, which was when I got to Vella La Vella after 2 days of travelling on a boat that was packed window to window with people, cockroaches and chickens, where it was you were struggling to find a patch where you could sleep. We arrived at Vella La Vella, the village, and in the back of my mind I was thinking, you know, Marlene had told me, don't worry about bringing any food, you don't need to bring any supplies, you are our guest, we will look after you. And I was thinking, I was like, I I really took her word for that. I haven't brought anything with me. So I packed a small bag, but no food, no supplies or anything. So we sort of, I had this in the back of my mind and I was worrying about it a little bit. Anyway, the next morning comes and I can hear the sound of the bell ringing and through the village, which signals to all the children that school is starting. And my role on this visit was to just be teacher's assistant. However, Marlene was really, really encouraging that she wanted a workshop to be delivered and to me to speak with the community about the importance of education. And so I had that sort of packed away and still was being a little bit stubborn about it. But anyway, I went to school and I remember the air feeling just electric with excitement. I was so excited to meet the students. I was so excited to meet the teachers who were doing such a phenomenal job to keep education going in an area that was substantially under-resourced. And I remember as the bells were ringing, I started to see these tiny children coming over the hill. One boy carrying a sweet potato, another boy carrying a pawpaw, another boy carrying some potatoes. And as they came closer into my line of sight, I realized that every child was carrying some piece of produce that they brought from their garden and strutting so proudly and excited to show me what they brought. And I think the thing that sat with me is, yes, it was so incredibly generous that they had gone to lengths to contribute. But the second lesson, and I suppose the one that stayed with me the most, was that when you look internally and you feel that you have nothing to give, it's not from a place of abundance. And sometimes you need to shift the way that you look at what you have. And you may not have a garden that's full of produce that you can give away, but you may just have one thing that you can offer. And it was a lesson to me to look inwardly about what my contribution could be, and to always ask my question is, what is my gift and how do I give it? So I did give the workshop, but with a twist. And instead of talking to these teachers about how to teach, which was a lesson I needed to learn from them, I instead spoke about an area that I did feel a lot more comfortable about, which was building engagement and working to build a movement, which are lessons that I'd learnt from volunteering with the Oak Tree Foundation. And I won't forget, because after that workshop, one of the teachers came up with tears in her eyes, and she said that where she was struggling the most wasn't in delivering the lessons, it was in understanding where her students were at and understanding why they were coming into school so tired. So it was a powerful lesson for me, coming away thinking about what career I wanted to do and what I wanted to pursue. And it was there that I started to think very seriously about nursing. And as I said, I always saw myself first and foremost as a humanitarian. And I'll jump ahead a little bit here, because the connection between nursing and climate change sometimes is missed a little bit. For me, when it sort of changed a little bit when I heard this guy, Simon Sinek, give a presentation where he was asked the question about the issue of saving the planet. And he said, we've got the language wrong. The planet will be fine. The planet will survive no matter with us or without us. What we have to do is save our species. We are affecting the climate to the point where we will make living conditions impossible for our species. Prior to then, I cared about climate change, but now it's started to become a humanitarian issue for me. And I started to realize that the social determinants that we talk about with health is greatly going to be impacted by climate change and environmental issues. It's like the train analogy that Carol shared at the beginning, is that all of the issues that we care so deeply about will be impacted by climate change. So I knew as a nurse, and I'll say this, I absolutely loved working clinically. I loved being a nurse, and I worked in pediatrics, and I would share so many stories about my time, but I just don't have the length of time today about to share every story that I had from nursing. But there is one that I'll share, and that was when I was working in Victoria. And I remember stepping out of my apartment and the air was thick and hot. And this was at 6 o'clock in the morning because I was on a 7 a.m. early shift. And it felt like I was walking through cream. That's how hot the air was. And I got to work and, you know, wiping off the sleepy eyes, trying to get myself ready for the day. And the outgoing nurse, who was slumped in his chair, had pulled out a wad of paper files, which was distinctly abnormal for my hospital because it was predominantly a digital hospital. And I said, what is going on? And he said, overnight, our air conditioning system, which keeps the servers cool, has blown up because it's overheated, which has meant the servers have also overheated and they've blown up, which means our entire system's down. So for me, I'm sort of thinking, oh my goodness, our patient charts, our medication charts, our patient notes, our documentation, everything. I don't have access to anything. All I've got is the last 8 hours that they've managed to pull from memory, the charts that we can use for our patients. I said, do you know when it's going to come back online? He said, we have no idea. And I mean, I've had some truly terrifying moments nursing where I've really had to step back and it's been quite frightening, but I've never felt more uncertain as a practitioner than that at that moment. And it was, I mean, the pennies probably dropped for many of you that was occurring during the 2020 heat waves that Victoria experienced. And again, probably some of you are thinking, piecing it all together. Those heat waves had happened a mere few months after the bushfires in Australia, and they happened a few months before we were plunged into a global pandemic. And I was quite literally plunged into a suit full of plastic and a N95 mask. And reflecting on the time, I just thought, this is the context that nurses will be leading in. This is the context that we need to be prepared to address as practitioners. But when I looked for nurses in the space, it seemed to be missing. And it's not to say that we don't have a responsibility. The Australian healthcare system contributes almost 7% of our total carbon footprint, which is huge. And that comes from not only waste, but also electricity, improper use of resources, mainly from keeping a normothermic temperature. It comes from our fleet vehicles. It comes from anesthetic gases. So if you compared healthcare globally, which is about 5%, it's actually more than the aviation industry. So it's pretty sizable chunk. And nurses have historically focused our interventions on adapting the patient's response to the environment rather than changing the environment itself and looking at these upstream measures. So seeing that there was a bit of a gap, I knew that something needed to be done, and luckily I wasn't alone. There were other like-minded individuals who felt the same way and felt that we needed Australasian leadership on the issue of climate change for nurses. So myself, the outgoing president, Letha Ward, Mark Holmes and Diane Hart founded Climate Action Nurses as a means to be an Australasian network of nurses who are dedicated to taking action on climate change to achieve better health outcomes for all people. We're founded on 4 pillars of action: policy, advocacy, education, and research. I want to do it again, just to really iterate those 4 pillars of action. And overall, our theory of change, which can you see my panel at the top, or can you see the top of it? Okay, great. So where our vision is empowering Australian and Pacific nurses to take urgent climate action for themselves, their workplaces, and their communities. And what we really want to achieve is to have an impact of climate-ready healthcare, climate-friendly communities, and climate-smart nurses, recognizing that the influence that we can have is not only in the hospitals, but also in our individual lives as well. So we not only encourage that nurses feel as though they're ready to take action on climate change, we work hard to really define what that looks like and what actions they can take based on the 4 pillars of action. So for example, if it's policy, it's contributing to our position statements and contributing to submissions to government. If it's education, it's developing some resources. And I'm sure you can relate to this with Zonta Says Now. It has just exploded. We have such a rich group of volunteers who are really passionate about what Climate Action Nurses is doing. And then we've achieved some major milestones as we've developed. Since we started, some of the things that we've contributed to, we've managed to launch our new website and our logo and our designs. We've put out a planetary health statement, a statement on student empowerment. We've made a submission to government and now a witness to a Senate Commission hearing in an upcoming hearing. And one that I'm really excited about, we're about to launch a portal, an education portal for all nurses across the country to access for free, with the resources that they can use to take action in their personal lives, or at work or at university. We are in a planetary health organisation in Australia, but also a global planetary health organisation. And we've reached a total volunteer membership base of 86 members, which is just phenomenal. So I'll be wary of mindful of time, and I will leave it there as an opportunity for if there are any questions. I'm hoping that I've stuck to 20 minutes. I can't quite see the time, so I will throw it over if there's any questions, and I'm happy to answer them.
Will I ask my question now? Waste. What about waste? Just like waste in hospitals and disposal of waste products.
Yeah, and I think, Jasmine, you mentioned about the infection control risk.
Yeah.
Which sort of sits in the area of quality improvement. And there's always been that sort of, are we going to compromise patient safety if we are recycling more efficiently? And the answer is yes and no. It really depends on the types of items that can be recycled. Mm-hmm. And I mean, most of our waste within healthcare can actually be recycled and can be recycled safely. Some of it can't, which is parts that have been exposed to bodily fluids and things. There's some really great innovations that are coming out, like needles that are hydrophobic, which means that they can be reused. I think that always makes people a little bit squeamish, and I keep making a note to myself, don't use that example, Catelyn. But there are some great innovations about how we can recycle items safely. I think actually the greatest barrier is more so around who is responsible for clinical waste. And I think from my own experience setting up a recycling program on the ward that I was on, I would do the recycling on my end and make sure that we were recycling PVC bags because we were a partner program with that. But once I had done my part, I had no idea where that waste went. I had no idea if hospital facilities and services were then getting it picked up by the appropriate people. And I think a lot of people feel that sense of, I don't actually know whether this is going to be impactful. And that's where we need really strong leadership in organisations to say, actually, what you're doing does make a difference. And also from Climate Action Nurses, our perspective, we need to be reiterating to people that what they're doing does make a difference, because it can feel so isolating and so lonely when you're trying to champion something. So for us, the biggest thing is about having a network of people that are saying what you do matters.
Yeah. Well, I think what happens sometimes too is that there's the perception that, well, it all goes into the one landfill anyway. Who cares? Why are we bothering at this level? But if enough people champion it, they sort of have to listen, don't they?
That's it. And if there's enough people that are really committed to making that change and they really want to see it happen and they know that it can happen, then I think that there's more likelihood that initiatives like that succeed.
Yeah.
But there's
Thank
great
you.
examples like Peter Alexander Hospital. They do some really great recycling programs. They were featured on the War on Waste. Some other examples are people that are using expired supplies and redistributing those. And yeah, anyway, I will leave it there because I can see that there are other hands up.
Vicky, you had a question.
Thanks, Caitlin. Very, very interesting. You've got Support the Cause, donate to climate action nurses. What's the intention for those funds? Have you got something really particular in mind?
At the moment, we're launching our education portal, which the funds are directly supporting that portal and the continuation of developing resources for that. So for me, I would really love to be able to we did a fantastic piece looking at showcasing nurses experiencing and championing change. And now I want to be able to translate that from not just being a research paper and a policy paper, but rather videos that people can interact with and that they can actually see so that all nurses can see themselves in the action. So the funding that we collect for our cause goes towards that. And one thing I didn't mention is that Climate Action Nurses is entirely volunteer driven. So none of our organisation members are paid. So everything that we do is from people that donate their time.
Caitlin, you mentioned earlier about doing work in the Pacific. What was with the Pacific nurses?
Which was that?
You talk about being the Australasian.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so obviously I have a very deep love and relationship with the Pacific from my time in the Solomon Islands. So we do have some Solomon Islander nurses who are connected with Climate Action Nurses. And also last year I spoke at a planetary health conference in New Zealand. And so we have some of our membership base nurses working in New Zealand as well. The plan, and I'll be honest here, Carol, because we haven't quite expanded as much as we want to into the Pacific, but the plan and what we want to be able to do is form a really strong foundation of solidarity and relationships between Pacific Islander nurses to know that there are nurses in Australia that are championing this cause and we're taking the responsibility quite strongly, but also to develop the relationships, I think, because more than anything else, once you have that relationship, it compels action. And I think you have that deep sense of empathy that drives action as nurses. It's one of the things that really connects us to what we do, is that is the connection and the relationships that we form with patients and the stories that we tell.
Brilliant. I see we've got hands up from Sue and then Janice. Do you want to ask your questions?
So, Caitlin, I'm just wondering if you had anything to do with Doctors for the Environment yet, or thinking about that in the future?
Yeah, we do. Doctors for the Environment are incredible. So Kate, the CEO, and myself, we're working closely. One of the collaborative works that we want to put forward is they published a really fantastic resource for doctors that really sort of explained the role of doctors in planetary health. And planetary health is the concept that our human health is entirely dependent on flourishing ecosystems. And so they published this paper that was used as a resource to develop their undergraduate curriculum. And so I asked Kate if we could work on potentially doing a similar piece with nurses, with climate action nurses. I recognise that Doctors for the Environment, they've been around for a long time. And so we've got a lot to learn from them, but even just having the relationship and being able to bounce ideas off each other has been so, so valuable. Because in some of the circles I've been a part of where I've, been at a conference, nurses are often talked about as being almost like a barrier to the change. And that is for me, I think, oh no, we can't be having that. We need to be really coming to the table and being a part of this conversation because we make up such a large percentage of the healthcare workforce. And we can have a real impacts if we ready to champion the cause and to be a contributive partner in that. So yes, we are aware of Doctors for the Environment, and I have so much respect for what they've championed already, and I'm hoping that climate action nurses can be as impactful as they've been.
I think we've got our last question is from Janice.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. Really, really interesting, and all kudos to you for your work, particularly in the Pacific. Are you affiliated with comparable organisations in Europe, in the UK, Canada, New Zealand, the US? I mean, not suggesting that you are an international organisation, but I wondered if you're affiliated with or are aware of comparable organisations.
Yeah, there are several comparable organisations. So there's the American Nurses for Healthy Environments, ANHE, ANHE, and they have partnered with Healthcare Without Harm, and they delivered the initial Nurses Climate Challenge, which was a portal. And through their work, we asked if we could bring that work to Australia. And they said, we're actually changing the direction of it, but we're really happy for you to take the idea and bring that to Australia, which was wonderful. But the other one that we're really closely working with is the, it's a mouthful, the Consortium on Global Health, the Global Consortium on Climate and Health Education. And it's the Global Nurses Working Group. So it's a Global Nurses Working Group out of that consortium. And I represent CAN on that consortium, where they're trying to develop internationally consistent health curriculum for nurses, doctors, but specifically the Global Nurses Working Group is doing nursing. So we're in a process of developing learning objectives that get peer reviewed and then critiqued, and then obviously we define them, refine them rather. And the benefit of that is that there's lots of different representatives from organisations all across the world. A lot of them are based out of universities, but groups like Climate Action Nurses can also learn from and connect with some of the leaders in this area. And so that'll be really exciting when that material comes out, because then that'll be consistent education that we can give our undergraduate students in formal tertiary, but also masters and postgraduate students as well. So there are many groups, I guess, is the short of that. And I'm learning more each day about different networks that we can learn about. In Zonta being one of them, it's been I think that there's so many areas where we're quite aligned in vision. So.
Okay, I think it's time I have to hand over to Sue to thank you.
All right. Caitlin, I think when you talked about your interest in social justice leading to your environmental interest, I think that's very aligned with Zonta, that social ideas have in fact meant that the next step now is that we have to be worried about the environment. So I think your organisation is very aligned with ours. So hopefully in the future we might be able to do some work together too. You're an amazing young woman. It gladdens our hearts to see amazing young women like you leading the way with this. So thank you very much today.
Brilliant.
Thank you. And thank you so much for holding the space for me to be able to share what we're doing. I mean, it's so exciting and I'm so inspired by the work that you guys do. I'll jump off now, but I'm more than happy. I think my details, I'm happy for that to be shared around, and I love having conversations, and I know that I've already started to pick Carol's brains about ways that Climate Action Nurses and Zonta can work together on some projects. So it's already happening.
If you want to stay on, you're more than welcome to stay on, Caitlin, and just disappear when you're ready. And so you're always welcome as part of the Zonta family here. So that's no drama. And I wish you all the best with your Area 5 workshop presentation.
Oh, very exciting! Yeah, it would be great. Thank you, everyone. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
That's great. I'll put back the screen and share screen this way, and just move ourselves forward. Caitlin was amazing. Right, bit of international news. We've received some wonderful entries for the virtual art gallery and have extended the closing date to the end of February, so we can launch the gallery on Mother Earth Day, which is the 22nd of April. So please think about entering a photo, a poem, a collage, a quilt, picture of a quilt, whatever. You enter the digital version of whatever you have. You could even do interpretive dance if you wanted to. And you submit it with an entry form, which you can get from the zonta.org website. And which has a little description of it. But it'll be interesting to see that launch on Earth Day. We have registrations for convention are now open, and if you'd like to leave in the chat line if you'd be coming, that would be great, because we like to hear from you. We know that some people were hesitant about flying across the world, so the International Working Group put together this guide to environmentally responsible air travel to help minimize emissions. And you're probably thinking, oh, what's this? Well, basically what we're doing, it's designed to be read on screen, and in it we talk about why Zontians like to attend convention in person and some simple tips to reduce our air travel emissions. For example, we can choose an airline with newer, more fuel efficient aircraft, we can fly economy, we can pack lightly and avoid excess luggage, and we can choose direct flights or flights with fewer stopovers. And we explain that air travel is not sustainable yet and describe some of the steps that are being taken to reduce emissions. However, until we get the big breakthroughs in technology, we must save emissions in different areas of our lives and put them towards air travel. So on page 2, we suggest a few options to make savings in our personal climate budgets: walking, cycling, using public transport, reducing energy use, thinking twice before we purchase anything so that we consume less and waste less, and reducing the number of flights we're taking by staying longer at the destination and combining business with pleasure. And then we show how to calculate emissions using the International Air Transport Association CO2 Connect emissions calculator. You put your flights into this database and it works out how many kilograms of CO2 are used. So it's easy to use, and we briefly explain how the amount is calculated. It's unlikely that all of our lifestyle changes will cancel out the flights, so we recommend also offsetting our emissions. So offsetting is when we buy carbon credits from reputable environmental projects that remove the same amount of emissions from the atmosphere as we will use on the flight. So where do you buy these credits? Well, we describe the gold standard for the global goals that provides certified carbon credits from projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and contribute to at least 3 Sustainable Development Goals. This was developed by the World Wildlife Fund with other international NGOs and receives support from UN agencies like the UNDP and the UNFCCC. Gold standard projects must be gender sensitive, and one project has gone a step further and is designed to be gender responsive. The Lango Safe Water Project provides clean water from boreholes. So women and girls, they treat the water, so women and girls no longer have to walk to collect water or wood to boil the water. And thanks to the project, violence associated with water collection is now 0. The local Water Resources Committee membership is almost gender equal, and women have more time to spend on income generating and leisure activities. The project saves 50,000 tonnes of carbon each year and provides clean water to 40,000 people, reduces diseases and reduces school absenteeism. Imagine offsetting your emissions by advancing gender equality at the same time. Anyway, the leaflet's on the zonta.org website. Well, it should be there formally very soon, but we've got the draft on our own website. So please follow guidance if you're flying to Brisbane or anywhere. We'll also have a Zonta Says Now workshop around disaster readiness. Now, you may be aware that last year the working group developed the Action Guide on Disaster Preparedness and Response. And with more disasters happening every day, International President Uta Schultz wants Zontians to ramp up our disaster preparedness activities. Now, in District 23, we were ahead of the game and we launched our leaflet at the District 23 conference in last September. But internationally, they wanted more help. So we've now developed some international resources to go with the International Action Guide. And as you can see, they take a question-based approach and ask questions like, why are women and girls more vulnerable to the impacts of disasters? Is your household disaster ready? Is your community disaster ready? Where are your local disaster relief organisations? And is your country disaster ready? So I'll just show you them quickly. I won't go through them too much, but the first one just goes through why they're vulnerable, you know, having less access to information, caring responsibilities, mobility, socio-economic status, assets, higher rates of malnutrition, etc., less participation, and less access to skills. And it goes into the unique needs of women, you know, protection from gender-based violence, reproductive health care we need, mental health and psychosocial support, livelihood and education opportunities to rebuild your life after a disaster, how we can participate and lead grassroots interventions, food security and nutrition, how we get that, make the food supply secure, shelter and housing, education and information. And there's loads of links there as well for further information. That would take it back to the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. The second one is about your household being disaster ready. And this is some of these overlap with our District 23 one, but you can see how they're designed for an international audience. So we can't put particular institutions in unless they're international. So this one is really, what sorts of disasters happen in your area? Are you mentally ready for a disaster? That's a big one. Do you have a disaster plan? How will you find out about it? What if you're away from home, etc.? And what is in your household disaster plan? And then we talk about a few of the things to pack and how you can write a plan and where to go for local resources over here, as well as access to the Australian Red Cross Ready plan if a country does not have any help, anything that they can use. One of the Zontians in District 12 in America, she actually did a presentation at a District 12 Climate Change Committee meeting. And it's her personal experiences of packing and how she prepares for disasters, which gets quite a few of where she lives. So that's a really interesting, very personable talk. The third one is about, is your community disaster ready? Is really talking about with your local governments, finding out the questions, asking them questions about what is where, who does what, you know, where the information is, and how women are included in the disaster preparation and response plans. And so it just talks about the questions to ask, and then what you can do by applying the framework for action to actually get that information and use it within your clubs. So this is a club action guide, really. And number 4 is really a fill-in form for anywhere to put your Zonta Club name in, where you get your emergency warnings, where you can get the template, where the emergency apps are, so you can put in the hyperlinks and then print it off for your members. So it's all these different things that you can put in. And we've got our District 23 guide reference there to give people an idea of an example of what has been done elsewhere. And we also mentioned the What 3 Words app as well. The 5th one is about, is your country disaster ready? And this one is, again, designed to help Zontians take that next step into advocacy nationally to see what they can do to get legislation changed. And this is one of the main hazards that your country faces. And what's your national agency that coordinates those activities? And what's the one that provides the advice? You know, so it's what are your disaster agencies and your CSIRO type organisations that provide the science? So you can fill in these hyperlink areas and then you can just print off the forms again. And it's just got some importance about collecting gendered data and just a little checklist, you know, how you can learn and educate yourself about disaster and gender, join and create a network, engage with your national disaster management and participate in disaster risk assessment planning meetings, etc. So there's just a few things there to stimulate the discussion and to just get people thinking about this. Yeah, I was just going to mention I've been volunteering with Red Cross Emergency Services recently, and been doing recovery outreach for places that were impacted by bushfires. And I've had so many stories of people how they've been navigating their way back to a normal life after they were heavily impacted by fires. And I'm sure many of you have experienced similar stories of people, trying to rebuild their lives. And it's it really touched me. Things like when sheds were destroyed and they contained all of their father's tools, and people lost their homes, and some luckily on this particular fire nobody lost their life. But the stories of volunteer firefighters spending the night in people's driveways, putting out spot fires, and people being told, go to bed with your window open because we'll be going down the street if you need to evacuate, shouting out of the, out over the loudspeakers on the fire brigades. And that's what happened. So it's very frightening for people. And this, I hasten to add, was a suburb on the outer fringes of Perth. So you had the main highway, which has got suburbs either side of it, and the suburbs were only, were touched by the fire. And people were saying, but I live in the suburbs. I did not expect this to happen. And the fire just came so quickly upon them. And they were talking about the smoke. They could not see the smoke. The noise of the helicopters. A helicopter going overhead now just triggers them because it just brings it all back. And it's the wildlife that came out of the bush and was all over the roads. And it's how different people are dealing with that. So one other thing which I just wanted to raise with that issue was, in District 23, we have the Mental Health First Aid project. And that is a really good one to get behind, to prepare your community for getting mentally ready for before a disaster, and also helping after one as well. So that's I just wanted to raise awareness of that. Anyway, I just want you to be aware of the Climate Change Amendment Duty of Care Intergenerational Climate Equity Bill, sexiest name in Parliament. And just to be aware that they've received 379 submissions, and the Senate Standing Committees on Environment and Communications are due to report on the 1st of March. So you can follow the progress at aph.gov.au. Sue, you mentioned something about you'd done something with a shop in Melbourne on Yarra Club. I just want any news that anyone would like to share.
So the other Melbourne on Yarra people can come in on this. But last year we actually did a couple of weeks volunteering at an op shop in Waverley, in Victoria, Glen Waverley. And I think what people have found from that is that, we were able to actually encourage people to recycle. We got a bit more knowledgeable ourselves about what people do want to use, the sort of secondhand and that. And in my case, I picked up designer clothes for $5 and $10. And then when I got home, and other people in the family said, oh, you should be in our clothes swap that we've started now. So quite a number of us are doing a clothes swap together. So I had never actually thought really of going into an op shop to buy clothes before that. I know for a lot of people it's quite popular, and I have friends who do it all the time. But it certainly changed my ideas about the quality of clothing and everything that people bring in. So that was quite in some ways it sounds like a small thing, but it's been good for the club because it's a sort of social engagement with the area. And I think probably other people like me have found that it's actually been a useful economic activity as well as a social activity.
How did it come about?
Somebody else can help me here.
I can help you with that
Yeah.
one. The Zonta Club of Melbourne's East had they were originally based in Waverley anyway, and they have this stint. It's a Lions op shop, and the Lions op shop obviously is predominantly all Lions people with volunteers, and they needed help with the op shop. And I guess the size of their club in the area had gone down. So what they were doing was they were getting other charities in the area to come and run the shop for the day or the week, for a week. So you'd roster a few people on in the morning and the afternoon, and you would get a percentage of the takings. Your organisation would get a percentage of the takings for that week. I think at the time they deduct certain things, probably roughly 40%. So that was the idea of it, so that you would, and of course your club can contribute to it. Obviously, they want you to restock the shop so that your club members and other people, it's a good chance to do a bit of a spring clean up, and take it. And then that's you're helping to restock the shop, or you might sell your own things, but at the end of the day, it keeps it all going. And they've just used it. They've had volunteers from various service organisations over the years helping them out. And so Melbourne's East Club, they disbanded the 31st of March 2023, and 6 of the 8 members joined Melbourne on Yarra. And we thought, well, we could keep that going. They've gotten something established in the community. And the Lions Club in Waverley does a lot of work for people in the area. It's not, some of it's affluent, but some of it isn't. So it's just a case of, but as Sue said, and they want good stuff. They don't want the cheap and nasty stuff, because you can probably get that in Kmart anyway. So there's no point giving them a Kmart T-shirt, which they can spend $2 more and get a brand new one. Things like that. So we're sort of looking for various things, and they don't necessarily take everything. They had like a list of things that they would do, because it's not a huge shop, so you can't have lots of furniture and sofas and things, but it's a very small shop that's across the road from the library, I think. So just people, and I think it's a social outing for some people as well. But it's been good for us, and it's always been something that club's been doing. I don't know how many years now, at least 15, 20 years. So it's just something that we've taken on because of that. But as Sue said, you're recycling, you're reusing, you're finding a new purpose for things, and you're helping them out as well. So
that's good. That's good. And did anyone have anything else? Faith, you've got your hand up. Faith, you're on mute.
Unmute. I'd just like to let everyone know that Zonta Club of Perth, Vicky and I attended the inaugural meeting of the WA Women's Advocacy Forum last week, and one of the things there is, and this was initiated from the Sir Optimus Club, and we're going to refer with about 45 voluntary groups throughout Western Australia to collaborate all our issues that we need to approach the state and federal government with. And we have been given the notice that we have a step already into the state parliament. We have ears there, and they're hoping to use us as a showcase for the other states, and that so that all the clubs can join together, and instead of just being 45 plus different clubs approaching government, will be one voice to with a lot of strength. And that, so I just thought I'd bring that to notice, because Zonta will be represented on this.
Brilliant. That's excellent news. Vicky, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Yes, we're club news wise, we're doing the mental health first aid very soon, in that we're just finalising grants and monies for that. And we're going to be partnershiping with other groups in Devonport, using their facilities and facilitators, and working with the Zonta Club of Cradle Coast in with supporting them in their call for good quality op shop items, but for their particular project. But we're doing it also for Dress for Success. Dress for Success is coming to the Northwest. We're going to be running an event kind of linked to International Women's Day or Women's Week or Women's Month, and that we will be contributing garments for that and modelling for that. But it hasn't hit the Northwest Tasmania yet, but they really want to establish themselves up here. And if for those who are unfamiliar, they're the ones that support women in particular with beautiful, but quality clothes so that they can apply for a job or turn up for their first day on the job. But they also provide confidence building and support before and after. So we're about to start that in Devonport, and looking forward to see how that pans out. And Cradle Coast, as I say, doing their own effort to collect a number of these sort of beautiful garments so that they can do the same for the women in their district. So that's me.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Oh, no, that's good. Anybody have anything else that they'd like to share in that space? No? Okay, well, I will move on. Yeah, that's my Vicky. At our last meeting, Councillor Alida McKern was asked questions about Scope 3 emissions and hospital waste, and she gave a reply back again, and identifying that councils use their council corporate emissions reduction plan, and they have sustainable procurement guidelines so as they can try and buy from places that have more sustainability, have more sustainable manufacture, etc., in their contracts and tenders. With regards to hospital waste, she reaffirmed it was really done mostly at the state health level, but if they did have a provider of hospital waste in their area, they would work with them to see that they could deal with the hospital waste in a safe and environmentally friendly way as possible. We have the NGO CSW Forum 68 is coming up in March, and we're going to be doing, well, the priority theme is accelerating the achievement of gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls by addressing poverty and strengthening institutions and financing with a gender perspective. What a mouthful. Anyway, the Zonta Says Now working group will be hosting a session at the CSW, NGO CSW 68, and all about how gender equal climate action works to end poverty, the Zonta story. So that's being developed at the moment. Marva has got her hand raised. I didn't notice that earlier. Marva.
I'm actually in California.
All right, Marva. I wondered where you were. So what would you like to say?
Well, I was actually back to the slide before this one, when you were talking about hospital waste. And one of the things that was identified here, I live in actually the Los Angeles area. So one of the things that was identified was the fact that, of course, we have all the hospitals have emergency supplies for disasters such as earthquakes, which we're prone to. And the food and all those items that are stored for emergency purposes have an expiration date, which, oh, thank you. I just thought the Julie glass I love it too, so it's very pretty. I haven't been to the museum there for his exhibit, but anyway, they developed a program because we have so many people that are needing emergency food, And so they developed a program where the hospitals routinely, at 6 months before the expiration date, they recycle the food and donate it to pantries, food pantries, so that, canned goods, etc., the non-perishables, so that they don't go to waste and they just don't get thrown into the trash bins.
Well, I'll email Catelyn and just find out from her what they do in that space. I know that they do work a lot with materials that are near their expiry date, so as they can get the maximum use out of them. But it's a point well made, Marva. There are many things in the hospitals that could be better used. I'm just going into to have a look in the chat line. I've missed that. Sorry about that, everyone. Faith, you'd asked the question about do the leaflets cover when large areas of power are out, lack of internet for resources, hospitals, etc.? Not specifically, because we have to try and get the balance of saving space on the leaflets, etc. as well. But it's a very good point. We want people to think about things and ask questions of their local areas about all those issues. Kay, you've raised, if you're going to convention, are available to come to the District 23 meeting on the Wednesday evening before the start, please let Kay know so she can give the venue numbers. So please email Kay. You'll see her email address is in the chat line.
Thanks, Carol. I'm asking people to let me know if they're able to come, just so that I can procure us the right size room for the meeting. If you tell me you're coming and you don't come, it's not the end of the world, because it's a gathering where people will buy their own food and drink. So it's fairly low key, but we just need to have enough space for everyone.
And that's Wednesday, the 26th of June. So
yes.
Mark that in your diaries. Just checking the calendar. So that's great.
I have already heard from several of you. Thank you.
Excellent. I think mine's stuck in my draft box. I need to reply back to you properly, Kay. But yes, I'd love to attend.
Carol, I will just add you to the list. Don't fret.
Oh, lovely. Okay, that's good. Vicky pointed out, someone must have asked about what an op shop was. Vicky pointed out an opportunity shop is a charity shop, which is also known as a thrift shop in the US. So that's that one sorted out. Good. I think that's all the questions in the chat line. Excellent. I'll just move on.
Excuse me, this is Marva again. And just as a point of information, I am also a member of the Burbank Noon Lions Club. And one of our clubs in our district made a fortune off of a thrift shop that they ran, and then invested all the money, the profits that they made every year. And so when they dissolved their club because everybody got old, and they gave away thousands of dollars to the other clubs in our district that had charity foundations. But they made a lot of money from that thrift shop.
Yeah. Yes, we have lots of charities have their thrift shop things here, don't they, as well? In fact, we used to have a Zonta House one in Perth, which we used to raise money for the Zonta House Refuge, but that closed about 20 years ago, I think now. There's too much competition, I think. But that's great. Thank you for sharing that, Marva. Just on other business, I don't know if you'd seen this report that came out after the floods that they had in the Northern Rivers in 2022. And it pointed out that women bear the burden of labour and the health impacts of disasters. And they pointed out that women were subjected to violence, sexual assaults resulting in pregnancies after the New South Wales floods. It's a really good read because it just highlights many of the issues that we raise and we talk about within Zonta Says Now. It had some key recommendations, and I've just highlighted number 4 there, engaging women from the community in all phases of disaster preparedness and post-disaster responses. I think if any of you decide to have a community event about disaster preparedness and response, this report would serve as a really good catalyst for discussion, debate and conversation, and the necessity of actually having planning in place that does protect the needs of women. And it also points out that so many of the women were on the cold front of the response, and it was their response that made the difference, because they were the ones that were connected with their communities and knew their neighbours and got on with the recovery, far more so than the government agencies did, because they were so much slower to respond. Anyway, we talked about, for the rest of this biennium, Uta Schultz would like us to focus on disaster preparedness. So if you can really push, the guide to disaster management that we have, share it with your clubs, just raise the profile of it and just let people open their eyes to what's there. And also try and promote the mental health first aid, which is wonderful what you're doing in Tasmania, Vicky. That's superb with what you're hosting. And then we've also have these other leaflets will be coming out soon on the Zonta site. They're currently with Zonta International. They're just reviewing them before they get uploaded. And we do have the workshop at convention. So if any of you are going to convention and would like to help in the discussion groups at the workshop, which will be on disaster preparedness, please let me know. And so it would be nice just to make sure that we had people that were knowledgeable about Zonta Says Now amongst the audience, so as they can help guide the discussion in the groups, which would be wonderful. Now, I had an interesting conversation with Christine Trenorden. COP31, a couple of years' time, will it be in Australia? Is this an opportunity? So the government has said that it would like to co-host COP31 in 2026 with the Pacific nation. And so is this something that we would like to advocate to support with our local members to see if they will, sort of encourage the support any bid that's put up? And so as we can actually, within the COP 2031, promote climate justice, women, disasters, poverty, eradication, all of those sorts of things. The other thing that we can do in the short term is support the duty of care bill, and so as we can stop fossil fuel expansion at the unprecedented rate which is doing at the moment. Anyway, it's just an idea I'm floating out there to see what you reckon. But it might not be a done deal because, as Seve Painio put in, the Tuvalu's Minister for Finance and Economic Development, he said, we would only agree to the notion of framing it as a Pacific COP if Australia were to come on board and support the priorities of the Pacific on climate change. So that would mean ending fossil fuels, having it planned for a phase out, So is the government being hypocritical to Pacific nations when it still supports the expansion of the oil and gas industry? So that's where the Pacific Islanders are coming from, because they're the ones that are seeing the sea level rises, and they're the first ones to lose their nations. So that's something just to put in the back of your minds, just to sort of think about as to what it would take to actually raise it to the front of mind for our local members of parliament. Any other business? I think it's just really, what's your present for the future? Always donating to the Women in the Foundation to see what we can do to build a better world for women and girls. And remember that everything that we're doing is to help women like Dabor, Ayan, Claire, Maria and Judith. So we can make a difference to their lives. Whatever we do, it makes a difference. So what action will be your first action? As we always know, Amelia Earhart said the most difficult thing is the decision to act. The rest is merely tenacity. So I just love that. So our next meeting is going to be on Saturday, the 27th of April. We've moved it to the 27th so as it avoids area workshops. Okay, so so we normally have it on the third Saturday of every alternate month, but we're just moving it back a little bit because it clashed with a workshop. Okay, and keep your head out. Don't be tempted to stick your little head and arms inside. Okay, we can all move slowly on our progress, but we'll get there. So Email me if you've got any questions, and don't forget to check out the information on the website. And thank you all for your participation today. I'm just going to have a quick check of the chat line. We've got Vicky's happy to discuss. Yeah, what's we got here? I'll be attending in Brisbane. What day and time is it there? Oh, Saturday the 17th. Oh, that's today. Oh, okay, that's fine, 2:20. Happy to guide discussion on disaster management, Carol. Thank you, Vicky. That's lovely. Happy to be involved in the workshop, Sue. That's wonderful. And Marva's saying, when you are designing your disaster plan, please consider the needs for the disabled and what is needed to assist them in a disaster. Exactly. That's brilliant. And thank you, everyone, for your participation today and contribution. It's been really good. And remember to keep breathing, keep smiling, and have fun on your Zonta Says Now journey.
Thanks, Carol.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.